Dave Sliepka, welcome to the show. We were both at the very successful National. I'm not saying it was unimprovable, but I think it was the biggest one ever. And we're going to bat around some ideas, but thanks sponsors, all of whom were there: Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Over the Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, Comcy.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So Dave, welcome to the show. My experience of the National was very positive, and I'm sure yours was positive too, but being hobby veterans that we are, and certainly enjoying working with you all those years, you are not a yes man. You're very bullish on the hobby, but you call it like you see it. So what was your take on the National?
I had a tremendous experience. There's always room for improvement, but I saw nothing but positive signs. I saw a younger crowd than I've ever seen. I saw big dollars being spent by that younger crowd. The days of people saying you're pricing out all the kids. Well, I'm sorry, we're bringing in some pretty rich teenagers and young adults.
The kids are pricing out people my age. Because
really, that's probably more factual.
They've got a fatter wallet. And I don't know where they're getting the money. Maybe it's just parlaying these trade-up challenges they've cut their teeth on over the last few years. They've moved up from $10 to $100 to $1,000 to $10,000. They got spending money.
It's serious money. And this was my 28th National. I've been to countless Dallas card shows, and I saw no indication of a downturn. I saw no indication that this is the peak. There was a few Dallas card shows back post-pandemic where the rumbling in the room was everyone in the public was there selling. There was nothing like that this week in Chicago. It was an environment that the public was looking to spend. I saw a video interviewing people about how much were they planning to spend and how much did they spend. And it was crazy numbers, like more than I spent in a year on the hobby. And they were trying to spend $100,000 at the show.
But were they end users? Was that the final destination for the cards that they were buying? Or were they putting together something to then sell later?
Probably not. I go back to the rookie-driven market that makes a healthy hobby. And a lot of people are looking to put a lot of money in those quarterbacks because that's how you make a quick flip, by getting somebody now that all of a sudden explodes in the first few weeks of the NFL. Yes, there was a lot of that. But the thing that I like about the version of the end user is that they're buying singles. If they're buying singles, we have a healthy environment because that's a complete chain. If people are only buying boxes or only buying cases and then they're putting away, that's an incomplete chain. Single supports the dealer, supports the card shops, and it gives people reason to be buying wax, not just to put it away. Yep. So the fact that we have a healthy singles market, even though it may be short-term investing, I think that is a very healthy sign.
But you're saying it wasn't opportunistic buying of, oh, I'm going to look for some good deals, as much as I like these players. And I want to get good cards of my players. I'm a player collector. I want quarterbacks, or I've got my guy in basketball, baseball. You got Shohei, Judge, all these guys. So you're saying was player driven more than I want to find something cool. They're looking for players.
Yes, and willing to pay fair market value. Like you said, there's a lot of buying at the 80, 90, 105 of comps. I don't think people were out there looking for steals. They understand this is not a market or an environment where they're going to get steals. They were looking for certain cards and they're willing to pay for it. Now, there's always variations in the grading and numbering of those certain players. You can get a rookie card that's not numbered. You can get one numbered at 5 out of 10 out of 25, signed, not signed. There's different points of entry within the hobby, but it seemed like they're willing to pay what is fair market value. It didn't seem that they were only looking for bargains.
Yeah, but in the healthy market, you've got a number of sellers and you've got a number of buyers. Actually, in a healthy market, you've got more buyers than sellers.
Correct.
But it was almost like there were way more buyers than sellers there. Every other table of a dealer seemed to have buying at 85, 90% of comps aggressively. And I'm wondering if that was just defense against the repacker people that come around and try to buy up all the good cards to repack. Because when Big Brian Gray, he knows what he wants to buy. He might buy anything that's a good card at the right price, but at a very high 90% valuation, 95%, I think he was paying in some cases. That's something that he thinks is either currently undervalued or has a lot of legs and room to grow. That's what I'm wondering about. I want to make sure there's an equilibrium between the number of buyers and the number of sellers. If everybody's buying, who are the people that are selling?
I think that's what people were asking. Brian really was spending the millions that he was bragging on spending. I went by there. I saw the lines. I saw the cash going out. I saw the safes of cards that he was pulling in. That wasn't hype. That was really happening.
He had a line around,
Always,
but he wasn't the only one. But if you bring in cards, how do you know who to go to? There's a lot of marketing effort by some of these entities. And Brian now has become an individual instead of a corporate leaf guy. He's a free agent, but he has a following. Jeff Wilson with Cards HQ and his market movers. He had several booths. He's buying. Lots of people are buying. You can't go to Brian, stand in line for Brian and say, you're offering me $8,000 for this $10,000 card. I stood in line over with so-and-so and he offered me $8,500. Can you really shop it old school? Because part of what this episode is about is lines. Am I going to stand in line to sell my cards? And then if I don't like the offer, I'm going to go get in another line to see if they'll do it. If they don't do it, then I got to get back in line with Brian. Brian, will you still give me the 8,000?
I think Brian was putting out numbers that if the people were serious about selling, they'd be silly to walk away. And I saw that happen. It happened to me personally. I brought a couple of older sets that I thought it was time to sell. I went to one dealer. I had a price in mind that was my bottom. I added a couple $100 over that, thinking he was going to negotiate. He said, how much do you want? I told him what he want. He said, okay, that'd be fine. I was stunned. There was no negotiation. He took my number and made me think, did I underprice it?
But he's going to resell it, right?
Of course.
Okay. And so he's got to mark it up some. So he's betting we are not at the peak. By his actions, he is saying, I think the pricing, or at least the number of the people coming in and the future buyers are going to be buying that. And he may have sold it during the show.
Possibly. But you make a good point. There's buying happening at every level. It used to be the dealers are the sellers, the consumers are the buyers. It's all over the place now. The repacks and the breakers and the online things, that buying element is something that went from not existing to being enormous.
Yeah.
Because people are assembling these packs and ripping them online, and it does have good stuff in it. Yeah, it doesn't always. It's just like any other pack. But there are hidden people out there buying for other people, and they don't know who they are. There's organizations buying that appear to be individuals, and they're really for an organization, and they end up on Whatnot. Whatnot is vibrant with these breaks. It's going crazy with the amount of business that they do on a daily basis, to the point that some people are being treated for an addiction of the buying that is on there. It was a joke some people were making at the show, saying there's psychologists walking around looking for customers because people can't stop spending. That's a strange way to lead into saying the hobby is healthy. But
if I were a psychologist, and I'm a pro bono consultant, which means I don't charge, but most psychologists do charge. But you know what? They're not going to get anywhere if they charge dollars for their services. If, on the other hand, they say, if you got an addiction problem, come see me. I can help you through that, and you can pay me in cards. Because some of these people that have addiction, they have no money, but they have cards. And they're reluctant to get rid of the cards. They owe money on the cards. Credit cards, it's very problematic. But the addictive properties of it are because it's fun. People are not addicted to things that make them feel bad. They're addicted to things that give them a good feeling. And you couldn't have had a better feeling walking through the show and seeing all the velocity, all the liquidity. You know, the bad nationals of 20 or 30 years ago were because there was poor liquidity, poor velocity. You'd come back and you'd see a table and it looked the same as it did the day before. Some of these tables and booths, when you went the next day, what happened to your inventory?
Right. And it didn't end when the show bell rang. There was lines to get back in the show for the trade nights. Lines set up in the hotels across the street where people to have their collections all over the lobby. It did not end when the show ended at 6 o'clock. I would go out to dinner, come back to the lobby, 10, 11, 12, whatever, collectors, dealers, all over the lobby, still doing quote unquote business trades, having fun. And that is another piece of the equation. It's not a 9 to 5 show. it goes on till all hours of the night of people still doing business.
If you add all this stuff in, I think this show put an attendance record, the biggest national in terms of attendance, and I believe bigger than Fanatics Fest. But you and I have talked about the 10Xing that is a concept and would be nice, but can Fanatics Fest even 2X? Can the national even 2X? At the Stevens Center, it was difficult to get around, and the trade nights were full, the lobbies were full, all these events were full. Autograph situation was segregated, the breaking pavilion, all these kind of things. I don't even know that you could double it.
No, not double. There's not the physical space to double.
I'm saying, how many events do you know that have 200,000 people coming? That's like a World Cup stadium event or a NASCAR event, that it's just a massive footprint.
Right. And what Fanatics Fest is doing, that's a different thing, and I hope they're hugely successful.
They can't double either.
No, because they have Tom Brady at every one. How much better can you get? That's one of the things that the National seems to always have is your first-time signer. This athlete has never been at a National, and this athlete has never done a show. Fanatics has the top of the top at show 1 and show 2. So who else are you going to bring in there that they haven't already brought in? They've had LeBron and the rap stars. What else could be a bigger draw there? And the National always has
Michael, we went through some of the Nationals that were not super hot, and they were still a lot of fun, but it's more fun when it's a little more crowded and a lot more crowded. But it's not a sure thing that next year will be bigger. And it doesn't have to be bigger for it still to be a fabulous event. And then the year after, same thing. They could stay at 125, 130,000, and that's a huge, huge show. My point is, if this was the peak national and we're stuck at 125,000, 25,000 people every day on average, or 30,000, because it may have been 150,000, does it need to be bigger for everybody to do great? Lots of buyers, lots of sellers, lots of corporate activations. If it's a bigger footprint, it was really hard to see everybody and everything.
Like you said, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we would have loved to be stuck at these numbers. Judging the success or the biggest ever by the attendance number alone, I think that in itself is a mistake. There could have been less people at this year's show than last year by a few thousand, and nobody would have blinked an eye. It still would have been a huge number and a huge success. So I think attendance is not always the best way to look at it. I do think that we are going to see a small percentage uptick next year and maybe again the year after that. But I don't think that's the only way to judge how successful things are going.
Well, it could go more down than it could go up. That's the thing in a macro sense. And yet it sure seems really healthy. Now, I believe there will be price corrections, areas within the industry that are going to ebb and flow always. So some things are going to keep going up, but not everything. It seems like right now everything is hot. That is not sustainable. I think there are going to be some things that get overheated and are going to come down, but a general market correction would not be healthy. Just like everything going up is not realistic. That can't be for very long. If people are smart, they're going to try to figure what is undervalued, what is overvalued, what is a good value right now. And if it's overvalued, go to another area. The problem is they can't. They just want what they want. And that's fueling the high demand stuff just keeps going up until it gets to insanity.
Right. The volume numbers are solid, but at the same time, a price correction is inevitable. Naysayers would love to say a crash is coming, and then they're going to report it as a crash. But really what is going to happen is price corrections. We've already seen it. Let's use Luka Doncic Prism rookie card PSA 10. There are over 25,000 of them in the population, not graded, PSA 10s. That card was a solid $2,000 card in 2021. Now you can barely get 200. If people start to have that happen more often, that's when you start to see problems. But that is not a problem that is made by a manufacturer. That is not a problem created by PSA. That is a problem created by greed. $2,000, I said it back then 4 years ago. That's a crazy price for a population that will only do one thing, climb. So populations are a tough way to invest.
The more controversial point is there will be pockets of correction, even in vintage. And it has nothing to do with the pop reports. It has nothing to do with player performance. They're just going to be things that are in or out of favor. And people say, you know what? At that price, I'm not a buyer, I'm a seller. People need to get used to that. When prices get up really high, then there are no sure things. If something gets perceived as too high, then buyers are going to go to other things. Speaking of prices getting really high, the autograph area within the National, featured element for so many people that come, and it's just amazing the number of signers they get there. But that has not been optimized. Are they still mainly in the 20th century in terms of line technologies, or have they advanced a little bit? Because, as I said, the enemy of the National is the line. I don't want lines to wait on things unless they're very short or scheduled. Be there at this time. You're way more into the autographs.
That is the problem I faced. And one of the main objectives for me was to get a handful of autographs that I needed. A lot of them VIP guests where you had to wait in the line. Too many times was a signer announced at 2:00. I was there at 2:00. I didn't get the autograph until 4. It was a consistent 2-hour wait because there was no system in place to know exactly when you were to be there. I couldn't comfortably say, oh, I'll just come back at 3 or I'll just come back at 4. You're risking it because you don't know.
There's an app that would be so easy to develop an app. Everybody there has a smartphone that just would let you know where to be, when to be.
Get texted at a restaurant when my table's ready. Why can't it be that way for signings? We're now taking numbers 10 through 50. We're now taking numbers 50 through 100. I spent too much time in that area just standing around waiting just to make sure that I got something because you couldn't be sure. Let me first say I got everybody I wanted. I was thrilled with the guests, and for most part, the prices, they are what the athlete charges. They don't control that. So I'm not going to complain about that. I got the people I needed, but I took too much time off the show floor. That is what I did not like. That was a serious issue.
I won't say it's criminal, but it's revenue negative. But that's manageable and programmable. I won't say it's a no-brainer, but it's something that needs to happen because it's revenue positive for the players. It's positive for the show promoters. It's positive for the dealers. It's positive.
It would seem to be able to be repeated
And not only
at
that,
other shows.
I'll go another step further. It could be a paid app. You would be willing to pay for that app to know where to be, when to be.
Yes.
You're not going to pay $100 for the app, but if you had an app that told you, hey, this line right now or in 10 minutes, and if you click here, it's like getting a haircut. You're checking in online, and then you've got X number of minutes to be there in IRL in person.
But my athlete had more photo ops than they expected to have. My athlete had more super VIPs than they expected. I can stay on the show floor for another half hour. That's fine with me. And that's a win for everybody.
I don't care about the excuse. I just want to know if I'm going to stand in line or I'm going to have to wait. I don't want to wait. In fact, it makes me not want to do those autographs. As I said, I would stand in line for Roberto Clemente, but that will be in heaven. That will not be at a card show. You don't 10X or even 2X without coming up with some of these efficiencies.
It just surprises me it hasn't already been done.
Let's throw it out to Jeff Rosenberg then, because this has an impact on all of his business.